What is up, guys? Nick with Nick Lewis Art. Welcome to another YouTube video. I'm super excited for this one. We finally get to get our hands dirty, where we're going to be working with a little bit of clay today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll head on over to the wedging table, get our clay prepared, and let's do this. All right, so here we are at our wedging table. We've got a brand new bag of clay. We got 25 pounds of B-Mix without sand by Aardvark Clay and Supplies. This is my local pottery studio. I love all of their clay. I've been using it for a number of years. So we're gonna do a handful of mugs today. So we're not going to need a ton of clay. So I've got my wire tool here, and we'll go ahead and cut off some of this clay. I'm looking for anywhere between a pound and a pound and a half of clay, closer to a pound and a half. I really like coffee, and I don't like refilling my cups, so I generally make my mugs a little bit on the larger side. So go ahead and do this here. So I kind of just eyeball it to start, kind of break this off, and I got my little scale right over here. And that is a little over a pound and a half, so I'll pinch some off. All right, guys, so we're just wedging this clay up really quick, get those clay particles moving. Not super critical for smaller pieces of clay, but I like to be in good habits, you know, practice good habits with everything. So I always wedge my clay here. Sometimes I'll just do a quick wedge on the wheel, but since I got this nice wedging table that I just kind of made up with a piece of, I actually just put a piece of masonite board on top of my old workbench out here, and works out perfect. It's kind of like having my own little plaster wedging table, so it worked out great. So get these little bad boys wedged up, and we'll head on over to the table. So here we are at our wheel. So we're all set up. Our clay is wedged, so I went ahead and just put everything into a bag so that it is out of the elements and we aren't getting any crazy weird drying happening on one side or whatever. So just to kind of help preserve the clay a little tiny bit. But we're all wedged up into our individual pound and a half clay balls. So we'll start here with just one. And I was always taught to kind of take and round out the bottom. Creates a nice little point. That way when you slam it down, you are not worrying about capturing any air between the bottom of your clay and the wheel head. Obviously the air in any sense in clay is a recipe for disaster. So this kind of alleviates that. So we're just going to give it a nice big slam down. We'll go ahead and turn on our motor, our wheel here, and get things going. So anytime that I'm starting out, I always go push down is my first motion, just to make sure that my clay is secured to the wheel head. Okay, and then I will cone my clay. Coning is a basically form of wedging the clay on the wheel. Although that we have already wedged this clay, again, this is all just, you know, a part of being in good practice and, you know, making sure that you're doing the right things each and every time that you throw a pot, so that you have the highest likelihood of it actually making through each portion. I mean, anybody that's been doing clay a little bit of time, you're going to lose pots. It's just going to happen, you know. At one stage or another, whether or not you are a brand new beginner or you're a pro, everybody loses pots. It's just more or less about how many pots are we going to lose, you know what I mean? And not only that, like I said, making sure that you're doing the right things to make sure that likelihood, that you're having the highest likelihood of the highest success rate you possibly can. Once I've coned it up and down a couple times, help get those clay particles in line, everything is, moving the same direction. Your clay should be pretty much already centered. That's just kind of, and then so your last movement here, you grab your hand around the clay and then press right down just to make sure that any other stubborn-ish clay particles that aren't already in line kind of are in line here. Now the next portion is going to be, opening the clay mound up. But before I kind of get into anything, I want to have a clear idea of, what is the shape that I'm going to make in my head. There's countless forms and shapes. Even if you're just talking about a coffee mug, right? Something as simple as a coffee mug. You've got some that start with a big wide belly, some that have a very narrow base, some that have a really wide base. What kind of foot am I going to put on it so I know how much clay to leave in the bottom? There's so many different variables that come into play when you're starting out throwing a form. So having a clear idea of the form that I'm going to make is going to set me up to give me, again, the highest likelihood of having the outcome that I want. So the first form that I'm going to demonstrate for you guys today is going to be as close to a cylinder as possible. It's going to have a gentle taper in, but it's going to have a nice wide base. Again, just a nice sturdy base. It's a very simple, yet it's one of my favorite, designs, kind of industrial if you want to say that. So I'm going to take, and this clay mound here, I'm going to start with a little bit wider base than I would normally. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and push this down just a little tiny bit. So my base here now is a little bit wider. And I don't throw feet onto the bottom of these, so they're going to have a flush bottom, so I can go almost all the way down to the wheel head. Now, you want to leave about, about a quarter to, an eighth of an inch to a quarter inch down there. Obviously, you don't want to go all the way down to the wheel head, but I'm going to leave that bottom relatively thin. So now I'm going to just go ahead and pull directly out towards my hand here. And now I'm just opening up the base. Okay. And again, it's key to remember the form that I'm going to make so that when I'm opening this pot, do I want the pot inside to have a right angle, or do I want it to have a gentle curve as if I was throwing a bowl, right? So I want the inside of my clay to always represent what that outside contour or shape is going to be. That way when I trim it, the walls are as even as possible. Again, giving me the highest likelihood of having success during the firing process or drying process hereafter, okay? So for this one, since I'm going to have a relatively straight wall, okay, I'm going to bring my clay almost out to a right angle here on the inside, okay? Now, I always go and redefine my lip, all right? So I compress my clay particles at the top. This is going to help me keep the clay nice and centered, okay? So you always want to keep that lip in check by compressing the rim every time that we do a pull, okay? Now while my clay is nice and low, I'm going to also compress my clay particles down here at the bottom, all right? So at the base of my pot, I'm going to utilize this time until before I pull my walls up to address the bottom of my pot. Make sure that this clay is evened out, that all these clay particles are nice and condensed. If there were any little air bubbles or anything like that that maybe made their way into the bottom, we address that right now, okay? Now another cool way to take a look at the bottom of your pot is by taking your needle tool. You can go ahead and stab it down, and you can see here, I don't leave a lot of clay at the bottom of my pot. Again, just about 1/4 of an inch, okay, just enough. And this is going to be a direct representation of what the rest of my walls will look like, okay? Let's go ahead and make sure that I get that little pinhole condensed back. Alright. And so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our first pull. So I put a little bit of water on the clay, both the inside and the outside. And this first pull is really going to be just about lining this clay up. Just going to be about lifting this clay and kind of getting it in line with where I want to go, with where I want it to go. Alright, and I'm not applying a lot of pressure from the inside. I'm just using the inside hand as basically like a wall for my outside hand to be able to press against and raise that clay up. Okay. So my second pull here, this is going to be where a lot of my clay starts to get pulled up. My second and my third pulls are going to be my biggest pulls generally. And this is where I'm going to come under, and I'm going to drive my outside hand way underneath. You can see down here, I'm making an indentation into the bottom of the pot. And this is going to be the clay that I'm going to pull up. And I'm going to literally pull this clay up. I'm applying a little bit of pressure from my inside hand, but I'm mostly pulling that clay from the outside of that pot there. Alright, and I'm going to go back and compress my rim. Make sure that I'm nice and centered. Alright. Get some of this excess water out from the inside of my pot here so that my bottom doesn't get super soppy wet. Go back and I'll add a little bit of water to the outside of my pot, and I'll do my next pull. So again, applying a generous amount of pressure to the outside, gently squeezing, and lifting the clay up. This is really, I mean, 2-3 pulls. I mean, this is obviously, we're not working with a lot of clay. We're only working with 1.5 pounds of clay. So, you know, you should be able to get most of your clay up within the first couple pulls. So. I want to leave a nice wide rim on this so it feels good to your lip. That's pretty much it. I'm going to take and just give it a little shape up with my rib here. So this is a Mud Tools green, you know, semicircle rib here. It's really one of my favorites. It's actually one of the first tools I think I've kind of gone out and bought outside of like the beginner pack that, you know, like just your normal wooden rib that you have. But I've had this rib for a really long time. That's the thing, you know, if you buy nice tools, you really, you know, they'll last you for a long time. Alright, so there it is. Like I said, I mean, very, very simple design. I like to finish my rims off with a chamois. So I take a old leather chamois, and I actually used to use this one to wash my car, and I just take and cut a little piece off, and I wrap it right over the top of the lip here. helps compress these clay particles so you don't get any cracking. Also makes it really nice, finish really nice and smooth, so that the glaze doesn't run off of it or anything like that. When you put it to your lip, it's got a really nice feel and texture to it. You're not feeling any grit or clay particles or anything. Again, the glazed finishes on it really nicely. So I'm gonna try this little tool out. Obviously, if you guys saw my last video about the unboxing, with the unboxing and the clay tools that I got from Clay King, if you guys haven't seen it, I'd suggest checking it out. But this is XCM Tools foot tool or butt tool. I've never tried it, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this thing a try. My understanding is basically you put this on the wheel head, and now this is the medium size. I should have probably got the small size for mugs, you know. This is probably better for like a medium-sized vase, but what the hey, right? I mean, we're gonna just try it out here. Life's all about experimentation, so I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm just gonna go ahead and push this in and see if I can't get a little shape out of this. That is not bad, actually. I mean, even for a mug. So that's pretty cool. I made sure to leave myself a little bit of extra clay down there when I was throwing so that I could do this, because I had it in mind. So it didn't throw off the, you know, the bottom or the inside contour of my pot. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this one done. We'll go ahead and cut it off the wheel, and I'll show you guys another design here. Alright, so we have one cup or mug down, and so the next form that we're going to do is going to be a narrower base. It's going to have a little bit more of a belly, and then it'll have kind of just like a slightly fluted top. Okay, so we'll go ahead and grab one of our little clay balls out of our pack right here. Give it the little spin so we don't trap any air. Slam it down. Throw some clay on this bad boy, and let's get it going. So try to give you guys a little bit less of the lesson in the play-by-play on this one. And try to just kind of get right into the nitty-gritty. So I'm going to do my coning here. Alright, so again, since we're going to have a narrower base, okay, I'm going to start out with a narrower mound of clay. Alright, so I'll go ahead and just leave this one kind of thin and a little bit taller than we did in the last video. I'll do the same thing, drive my finger down, leave myself about 1/8 or so of an inch of clay, so 1/4 inch of clay here. Alright, and then I'm going to draw my finger out. Now on this one, if you can see here, the inside profile is a little bit less dramatic. So again, since my outside shape is going to be like this, okay, I want my inside profile of the pot to be the same. So I'm not going to have as radical of an inside dimension here. All right, so I'm gonna leave that there. Outside of my hand is gonna be doing the exact same thing here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just work my clay up. And get everything in line. The inside of my hand is like this, so I'm literally just pressing against this. I'm not really lifting or doing anything like that at this stage, okay? I'm just providing myself a rigid backboard basically to be working on. So I'll go ahead and compress my rim, make sure that I keep things in line for myself. Not super important when you're only working with 1.5 pounds of clay, but when you start working with upwards of 5-7 pounds of clay for some of us, 10-15 pounds of clay for others of us, having these good practices that you put into place, you know, are, again, make and break it, you know. And when you're working with £10 of clay or better, or you're working on a pot that takes you over an hour to throw, you don't want to mess it up over something silly, you know, that you learned back in a beginning ceramics class. So anyhow, that's just my 2 cents about it. I'll stop rambling. So I've got my second big pull done. I do have a lot of more clay down here, but since I have my clay to where it's starting to move up, my next pull, I want to start adding a little bit of shape into the pot. Okay, so I've kind of got this top portion here to where my walls are a little bit thicker than what I really want them to be, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Okay, so right now I want to focus just on the bottom half of my pot, and I really want to start pronouncing that base or the belly of the pot, and really starting to set myself up for where the rest of my pot's going to go. So I'm going to start by applying a little bit more pressure with the inside of my hand, okay, while still lifting. And that way I'm able to lift, and as I'm lifting, I am coming outwards a little bit past center. Okay, so this is my pot being straight up from the base, and now the base is starting, or I'm starting to bring it out just a tiny bit. Now this is going to be about the halfway point of my belly. So what I want to do now is I want to switch to where my hands were like this and I was applying pressure out. I want to switch this to where this hand is now going to be on the below, and I'm going to be applying pressure with my outside hand pushing back in. Okay, and so this and I'm going to take it, I'm going to collar my top back in. Here, and this little piece that is left vertical, this is where I'm going to have that fluted kind of lip, so to speak. Okay, so again, I'm going to come back and compress my rim just to make sure that everything is staying in line. All right, I'm going to take some of this clay out, or this water out of the bottom of my pot here, just because it's starting to get a little bit built up, and I really like to pay attention to the moisture of my clay so I don't get any S-cracks or anything silly happening. Again, not as critical on a 1.5 pound mug. So again, putting a lot of pressure on the inside hand. Pulling out and then switching back up. applying some pressure coming back in. Right here. Alright, so I'm going to I got all the clay out of the bottom of my pot, so I am going to finish pronouncing that bottom profile. I'm going to take my metal rib and I give my metal rib just a little squeeze like this so that it has a nice shape. Okay, and then I just take the inside hand and press that clay right out to the rib until the clay meets the rib and starts to squeeze and compress those clay particles. I'll do the same thing right here as I'm coming and I'm moving back up this top portion of the clay, or that top portion of the belly. Alright, and now this is where we have a little bit of that rim here, that vertical-ish surface now that I've kind of pushed back down since I was in there and got my hand down in there. So we'll take and just finish this bad boy off by pulling some of this excess clay out of here. Make sure I don't have any water in the bottom of the pot. Take my squeegee, compress this rim. I'm going to just cut this . Alright, so that is the second, shape that we'll be taking a look at. There's a ton of different variations, like I said. So the next couple I'm going to throw here, I'm going to do without talking as much, and I'm just gonna throw them. Okay, so here, nice dry hands. Cut underneath your pot. I like to take the flat surface of my hands, and you can just put the pot right here. Again, I don't throw with a lot of water, so my clay isn't super moist or limp or flimsy, so I'm able to go ahead and just pull the pots right off the wheel head. Alright, so like I said, I'm not going to talk during these ones. I'm just going to go ahead and slap the clay down and jump right into things. All right, guys, here we are. So got a couple mugs done, a quick 5 here. So these are like the 2 shapes that I traditionally will like. These are like my go-to shapes, if you will. So let me know if you guys want to see anything else or any other shapes. You know, there's espresso mugs and little shot glasses, and I mean, all different kinds of things, and we'll get into a larger variety of things. But like I said, these are my go-to mugs. Just had to get a couple things done. I'm gonna do some carving and stuff on these here in a few hours after they get good and dry. And so stay tuned for that video. Aside from that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave any comments that you have for me down below, and happy potting. See you guys in the next video. Thanks.